Okay, Virgo, you didn't go looking for this. And I want to start there because I think it matters. Because there's a version of this story where you're cast as someone who set out to make someone look small, who calculated a move, who arrived at a situation with the specific intention of demonstrating something at someone else's expense. That's not what happened. What happened is something quieter than that, more accidental, more in the specific register of someone who simply told the truth or asked a question that deserved asking or refused to perform agreement they didn't actually feel or stood in their own ground so completely and without drama that the person who needed everyone to stay small couldn't tolerate it. And in the presence of your simply being yourself, something cracked. Something that had been constructed carefully, maintained deliberately, protected through the specific mechanisms that certain kinds of authority require to stay intact, cracked. Not because you attacked it, because you didn't collapse in front of it the way it needed you to collapse. And people saw. Let me describe the dynamic that existed before this moment, because what happened didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened inside a specific structure, a specific arrangement of power that had been in place long enough to feel like the natural order of things. There was a group, and there was someone at the center of it who had established, through whatever combination of personality and positioning and the particular way they occupied space, a kind of authority. Not necessarily formal authority, the more insidious kind, the kind that operates through expectation, through the accumulated weight of everyone in the group having learned over time what the rules are, what is welcomed and what is not, what kinds of contributions are valued and what kinds are implicitly discouraged. And one of the implicit rules, possibly the most important one, the one the whole structure depended on, was that this person's framing of things went unchallenged. Not because they demanded that explicitly, because they'd created conditions where challenging it felt costly, where disagreement produced a response subtle enough to be deniable but clear enough to be felt that discouraged further disagreement. And people had learned and complied or performed compliance while privately thinking otherwise. And then there's you. And I want to describe what you brought into this dynamic that it wasn't designed to accommodate. Virgo perceives. That's the foundational thing, not just observes, perceives. There's a qualitative difference between watching something and actually registering what it contains, between being in a room and understanding the specific structure of what's happening in that room, between hearing what someone says and simultaneously tracking what the saying reveals about the speaker. You walked into this dynamic and perceived it, including the parts that weren't on display, including the specific mechanism of how the authority was being maintained, the particular way certain contributions were received and others subtly deflected. The gap between the stated values of the group and the actual operating values, the thing being protected and the thing being performed. You saw it, and here's the part I want to stay with. You probably didn't say anything about it immediately, because Virgo doesn't lead with perception. Virgo holds perception, files it, continues gathering information while maintaining the surface of normal engagement. Gives things the benefit of the doubt longer than most would, because premature conclusions are their own kind of error. But the perception was present. And at some point, some specific particular moment, something happened that made staying quiet feel like complicity. Hold on, because I want to try to describe that moment, the moment before the humiliation, the moment that made the thing you said or did or refused to do feel necessary. Something crossed a line. Not a dramatic line necessarily. Lines that look dramatic from the outside often don't in the moment they're crossed. They tend to be crossed in ordinary moments, in a specific comment that went slightly too far, in an instance of someone's authority being used in a way that cost someone else something real, in a moment where the gap between what was being said and what was actually happening became too wide to navigate without acknowledging it. And you acknowledged it, not with a prepared speech, not with a dramatic confrontation, in the specific, precise, completely unrattled way that Virgo addresses things when they've decided something needs to be addressed. Which is actually the most unsettling thing about it. Not the content necessarily, the quality, the complete absence of performance in how you did it. No obvious anger, no visible rattling, no positioning yourself for the moment, just clarity. The specific, devastating clarity of someone saying something true without needing the room's permission to say it. And the room went very quiet. There's an image I keep seeing, a building that has been maintained to look structurally sound. From the outside, from any reasonable vantage, it passes inspection, has the right appearance of solidity. People have been moving through it, using it, trusting its floor and its walls and its ceiling for long enough that the question of whether it's actually sound has stopped being asked. And then someone, not with a wrecking ball, not with dramatic demolishing equipment, just walks through in a certain way and the floor does something. Shifts, not collapses. Shifts, enough that everyone in the building suddenly feels it. Feels the thing they'd stopped feeling because they'd normalized the ground they were standing on. Feels the specific stomach-dropping awareness of ground that isn't as solid as it was presented. You were that walk, without trying to be, just by moving through in the way you actually move, with the specific weight of someone who doesn't pretend not to see what they see. The more I sit with this, the more I keep finding something about the followers, the people who witnessed this, and the title says they never saw it coming, which is true. And I want to describe what that not seeing it coming actually means, because I think it's about more than just being surprised by your response. They hadn't seen someone do that before in that specific context with that specific person. They'd seen others try to push back, possibly, and had watched those attempts get managed, get absorbed, get subtly discredited or dismissed in a way that reinforced the authority rather than challenging it. But what you did didn't get absorbed because you didn't do it in a way that the usual management mechanisms were designed to handle. You weren't performing rebellion, weren't seeking the group's approval for the challenge, weren't asking permission to disagree. You just disagreed from your own ground without needing the outcome to validate the decision. And that specific quality, the complete self-containment of someone whose position doesn't require external validation to be real, that's what the management mechanisms weren't built for. They're built to handle people who need the room's approval, who can be managed through the withholding or granting of that approval. You don't need it. And that made you ungovernable in a way that surprised everyone present, including possibly yourself. I want to describe what happened to the group leader in that moment, not with satisfaction, with accuracy. Something was revealed in the specific, unforgiving way that things get revealed when someone responds to a real challenge with the tools designed for a managed situation. When the response designed for keeping people in line encounters someone who isn't trying to stay in line and isn't afraid of whatever the response is going to be, the mechanism became visible, not to everyone immediately, but to enough people. And to the people paying the closest attention, the ones who had their own private perceptions of the dynamic, their own quiet reservations they'd been keeping to themselves, their own moments of noting something and then looking away to those people, something clicked. The thing they'd been individually sensing but not naming, because naming it felt like a larger step than they were ready for. Suddenly it had a name, had a form, had been given shape by what happened in that room. And once something has been seen clearly, it's very difficult to unsee. The leader knows that. And that knowing is what's driving whatever comes next. Wait, because there's something about the aftermath I want to describe carefully. This person is not taking it quietly. What I keep getting is a specific activated energy on their side. The particular energy of someone whose authority was publicly or group publicly disrupted and who is now in the process of deciding how to respond, how to manage the narrative, how to reassert the position that got shaken. And I want to be honest about what that looks like. It's probably not going to be direct. People who operate through the kind of authority this person has built don't typically address challenges directly. Direct address would require acknowledging the challenge as legitimate, would require treating you as someone whose position deserves engagement. They're not going to do that. What they're going to do is something more lateral, working through the group, through conversation with the followers who are now watching to understand what just happened and what it means. Through the subtle, persistent management of how the moment is being interpreted, through the construction of a narrative about what happened in which your action becomes reframed into something that can be dismissed. Be aware of that, not fearfully, with the specific Virgo clarity of someone who can see a mechanism operating. There's something about the followers I want to say, because they're at a choice point right now, even if they don't know it yet, even if it doesn't feel like a choice point to them. Something happened that disrupted the automatic consensus. The thing they'd stopped questioning just got questioned, and whether they continue performing the same compliance or whether something shifts, that's being worked out in them right now. Some of them are going to land where they've always landed. Through loyalty or comfort or genuine disagreement with your position, or simply the human tendency to stay with what's familiar, even when the familiar has revealed something troubling. But some of them are going to remember what they felt in that moment of watching. That specific, quiet, stomach-dropping awareness of ground that wasn't as solid as they'd been standing on. And for those people, something has already changed, whether they act on it or not. Whether it becomes visible or stays interior, something changed. And you were the cause. Without trying to be, I want to address something directly, the discomfort this might be causing you. because I think it would be easy to read this reading as triumphant, as the story of Virgo winning a confrontation, as something to feel good about. And there might be elements of that. There might be a part of you that feels the specific, quiet satisfaction of having said something true in a moment that required it. But I think there's probably also something else. Because Virgo doesn't typically enjoy this kind of visibility, doesn't seek the spotlight of having been the one who disrupted something, has a deeply ingrained awareness of the social cost of certain kinds of truth telling. And you're probably sitting with some version of that cost right now. The awareness that something changed, that the dynamic in this group has shifted, that your position in it is different than it was, that there are people who are reassessing you, some in your favor, some not, in the aftermath of what happened. And the uncertainty of not knowing exactly where the lines have settled, that uncertainty is real. And it's okay to find it uncomfortable while also knowing you did the right thing. Both can be true. There's something coming from the group leader that I want to name. A move, not immediately visible, not declared openly. Something that operates in the background through the channels available to someone who has built the kind of network they've built. Something designed to reestablish the equilibrium that got disrupted. And I want to say something about how to navigate that when it arrives. Don't shrink. Not aggressively, not with counter moves or strategies or the building of your own alliances. Just don't make yourself smaller in response to the pressure. Don't perform regret you don't feel. Don't edit what you said or how you said it into something more palatable to make the situation more comfortable. What you said was true, and truth doesn't require subsequent apology. What it might require is the specific Virgo steadiness of someone who has said something real and is willing to continue being the person who said it. Not loudly, just consistently, without flinching. That consistency, that refusal to be gradually walked back into a position you've already moved past, is what makes the thing you did something that lasts. The last thing, something shifted in that room. And I don't mean just the dynamic between you and the group leader or the perception of you in the minds of the followers. Both of those are real and both are in motion. Something shifted in the room itself, in the specific atmosphere of a space where a certain kind of authority had been operating unchallenged for long enough to feel inevitable, where the floor of the thing had become something nobody examined because everyone had normalized standing on it. You examined it out loud in front of people, and whatever happens next, whatever the group leader does, whatever the followers land on, whatever the social texture of this situation looks like in the days and weeks ahead that examination happened, it's in the room now. Can't be retrieved. And the people who felt the floor shift have felt it. Even the ones who will spend the next while trying to unfeel it, that's not nothing. That's actually everything. The truth you told, without needing the room's permission to tell it, is now part of what the room contains. And rooms that contain truth are different rooms than the ones they were before.